Hey, today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 2. So if you have your Bible, go ahead and open that. That is the very first page of the New Testament. And Matthew tells the story of Jesus along with three other people tell the story of Jesus as well. But Matthew is the first story of Jesus, and we're going to harp on that a little bit this morning. But I don't know about you, growing up, as you flip there, I want to tell you a little bit about how I celebrated Christmas. My family is really big into tradition, probably too much. In fact, when my wife and I moved out to Denver, a lot of those traditions were obliterated. But as I grew up, we did a lot of fun things, especially on Christmas morning. Some things as a kid that we would do is me and my younger brother would sleep on my parents' floor, and we would just kind of put some pillows down and blankets, and the floor was rock hard too, like not a lot of comfort. I would wake up hurting today, but we would sleep on my parents' floor so that we could all wake up on Christmas morning together, and that no one would kind of get out into the living room before anybody else. And that's something we would do every year growing up. And I did it like into my teenage years. Me and my brother laugh now, but that's something we did. And we would wake up and we would all kind of begin to get hyper in my parents' room. And my dad would be like, hey, I need to go make some coffee before we go out to the living room, which now I understand why that needed to happen. So he went out, he made some coffee, he'd come back in, and once Dad had his coffee, we'd all be able to proceed out to the living room and see presents under the tree. And normally, my grandfather died when I was very young. Normally, my grandmother would be there on Christmas morning, and she'd be sitting there, and she'd be excited, and she would normally be the one. Actually, my dad wasn't the one who was following us around trying to get the trash from us. It would be my grandmother. She would be the one making sure that all of the wrapping would get into the trash bag. And then the Feast of Feasts would happen, and we would have pork roll, egg, and cheese sandwiches. Does anybody in here, let me ask this, has anybody not had pork roll? Raise your hand. Oh my goodness. Pork roll is the best breakfast meat ever, objectively. So I'm from New Jersey, and pork roll is kind of this like processed pork shoulder that is kind of like ham, but not even in the same category, in a higher category, and phenomenal, right? And what we would do is we would just make these great Sammies, and we'd put them on either a hard roll, which is the Kaiser roll, that's what we call it back home, right? Put it on a hard roll, or we would put it on potato bread, and we would layer it with cheese and egg, and it would be so delicious. So that was every Christmas morning. Now, through the years, there were a few disruptions to our Christmas morning. One Christmas morning, I woke up, me and my brother wake up, and we wake up, and Mom and Dad aren't in the room. We're like, wait a minute. Did they wake up before us? This doesn't seem common. And we go out to the living room, and we find my dad with his entire leg wrapped up. He had broken his leg the night before after he fell out of the attic getting some Christmas morning essentials. And that day, my dad was a little out of it. He was scheduled for surgery the next day, and he was on some medication that made him a little bit different than normal. There was another Christmas that we woke up. I was so excited, and I'm trying to get everybody else excited, and I'm realizing, wait a minute, my mom and my dad and my brother, none of them seem right. And then everybody's kind of like, oh, I don't feel well. And I'm like, I feel fine, right? Just because you don't feel well doesn't mean you're going to steal this from me. We're going to go out to the living room and do our thing, right? Like we all kind of go out to the living room, and in the middle of opening presents, my brother barfs everywhere, followed by my mother and my father. I was fine, though. And in fact, this thing lasted for days. And you know what I did for days? I had pork roll every meal for 4 days. And it was fantastic. I wish I could do that now, but my wife won't let me. It was a bummer when these disruptions happened because it kind of just interrupted the status quo of Christmas morning, right? Disruptions are unwelcome. They're disorienting. They're usually no fun. In fact, over the past 2 weeks, I can't even tell you how many people I've spoken to, and maybe you find yourself in this room, who have had Christmas plans canceled or changed, or flights canceled or changed because COVID-19 is on the rise and things are getting a little crazy again and everything is in disarray. Disruptions kind of stink. They're no fun. Interruptions of regularly scheduled programming tend to shake us up a little bit. And the story we're going to read today, we're actually going to see God disrupt the status quo of two groups of people. He disrupts the status quo of two groups of people by sending his son and sending this star in the sky. And these two groups of people actually, they respond very differently to this disruption. So let's go ahead and let's read it. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 2, the very first verse. So if you're a kiddo following along, the chapters are the big numbers, the verses are the little numbers, and we're going to start with chapter 2, big number, little number 1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, 'And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." Verse 9, after listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So we see this story here. It's a unique story. It's actually only told in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. That's about 6 miles out of Jerusalem. And word has kind of started to spread about this ruler, this man who will shepherd Israel. And the Magi, these guys from the east, were kind of have to figure out what these guys are all about, who they are. They travel long and far following this star to come and meet Jesus. But as they're traveling, and even when they get to Jerusalem, opposition is building quickly. Now, what we see in this story, and what you could tell right from the beginning, is that God disrupts not just a couple people, he disrupts all of Jerusalem with whispers of this Jesus, King of the Jews. Suddenly, everybody begins to be taught, have conversations with each other about who is this? Who is here? What is happening? You see that many of them are troubled. These men from faraway lands have traveled in to worship him. I mean, this guy must have some power. There's something about him. What is this? And it had been probably 1 to 2 years since Jesus was born. Jesus was probably talking a little bit and maybe walking around. And suddenly there's this disruption. God's sovereign hand is clearly at work here. God's actually executing global, universal power to wake people up to what is happening. There's this star, and many have tried to kind of look into this star. What star was it? Why did it appear? Could there be some type of explanation? And people have fallen short. There's this supernatural thing happening in this text that we read, that God has placed this star and has these men following this star that stopped right over Bethlehem, which is not far from Jerusalem, and now they're looking for this king who they've come to worship. And this isn't the only thing that God has orchestrated. This isn't the only way that God has executed global sovereign power to show people and to warn people about this king who has come. He has also spoken to shepherds in the fields, and he has brought Mary and Joseph to the place that they're at through a census, kind of in a divine way, so that star could appear where it did. He has given dreams to protect. He has given visions. He has sent angels, etc., etc. Jesus' arrival caused a stir, even though it was humbly. Jesus was born in a stable. But God wants people to know. He disrupts people's lives so that they may see who has been born. We first see right here in chapter 2 that he disrupts a man named Herod. Herod, who himself kind of saw himself as king of the Jews. He was under the authority of Rome, but he ruled all of Israel, and he was successful. I mean, this man did great work. He beautified everything that he oversaw. If you look up Herod and you see some of his work, he created these beautiful palaces on the water, places that he would live and places that would make his reign notable. But the thing about Herod is he's quite a paranoid leader. He ruled firmly. He was ruthless. He killed some folks, killed his wife and sons and relatives whenever he was threatened. And now you have this king. People are coming to see this king, to meet this king, and his reign is being disrupted. He's threatened. His rule is threatened. But he isn't the only one who is disrupted here. You also see in the text that all of Jerusalem is troubled. And namely, you see Herod call the religious leaders to himself, the chief priests and scribes, and he asks about who is this? What is this all about? And they are troubled with him, but they tell him, well, this actually is most likely the Messiah. They refer to Balaam's prophecy in Numbers 24. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. They refer to the fact that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, as the prophets has foretold. But if you kind of read behind the text, these religious leaders are quite passive. They fully knew this information, but they wait until Herod calls them to him. Because they themselves they're troubled. Their comfort has been disrupted, and they were certainly influential. And if there was a king that came that was more influential than them, there would be problems. And then we have the Magi. These folks far from the east, they're far out, and this star rises, and they're probably least familiar with the Hebrew text for sure. They don't know as much as the religious leaders do, but they follow this star to the place of Jerusalem, and they start asking, where is this king? They pick up, uproot, and move in order to find him. And there's a lot of question around who these men are. They're kind of experts in mystery. What does that mean? We're not really sure, but they're probably stargazers, these men who would just be experts in the wise, right? We all kind of want to be magi, right? We want to think that we are experts in all things wisdom, right? But they probably along the lines of like astrologers, dream interpreters, sorcerers. It's kind of like if Elon Musk meets Dumbledore, probably somewhere in that spectrum. Don't quote me on that. But these men pick up everything, and they're least agitated by the king who has come. In fact, they seek him out. Israel and the Magi, they've experienced this unique disruption that a king has come. Not even that, it's not no longer the king is coming. No, the king has come. When Kate and I had our first child, when we had Kaya, we had family on alert. We were texting, giving updates. We knew a due date. We had an idea of when things would happen, and family was prepared. Friends were prepared. They were all going to come and to celebrate, and it was pre-COVID, so you could actually do that, right? And it was just like this, wow, everybody's kind of anticipating getting ready. But what if you were to get a call from a family or a friend, or maybe even you, and you're like, hey, actually, a king isn't coming, a king is here. He was just born out of nowhere. That is what these folks are facing. But it's not just some kid. It's not my daughter Kaya, right, who I love with all my heart, but she hasn't been prophesied 700 years beforehand that a king would come to New Jersey and be born there, right, and probably eat pork roll. No. This is a ruler being born who will lead the people, and God's sovereign hand is at work to make Jesus known. But here's the thing. God is making little baby Jesus known, but the very nature of Jesus himself, it is disruptive. Like the Magi had these scraps of truth where they were following this star and they didn't really know what they were looking for, but they wanted to worship this king. The religious leaders, they knew the details of where this Messiah would come from, and they were actually, they responded in kind of a weird way. The very nature of Jesus is disruptive. Isaiah, the prophet, says that a great light will come and will shine upon people. He continues on and says, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And he doesn't stop there. He continues and says the government will be upon his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of government and of peace there will be no end. And on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. One pastor scholar says this, that this is the invincible figure striding across the world stage, taking gracious command. Jesus himself, this is the one who is born. His very presence is disruptive. And if we say that the Magi didn't know much about the coming of Jesus and the religious leaders at least knew what was going to happen and should have been anticipating Messiah, we know all the more. We know all the more about this Jesus, God's Son, who lived perfectly, died acceptably, and makes a way for mankind to be connected to God and for us to be all that God had intended for us to be in the first place. We see a description of Jesus in Colossians 1. Colossians 1, verse 15, all the way to 20, describes the preeminence, the supremacy of Jesus. Let's read that. It'll be up on the screen. He is the image, this is Jesus, of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent, which is to say, he might be first. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. This is the one the star was pointing to. God's disrupting people's lives to show them who has been born, and Jesus himself causes disruption just by his very nature. Charles Spurgeon said this, "Infinite and an infant, eternal and yet born of woman, almighty and yet hanging on a woman's breast, supporting a universe and yet needing to be carried in a mother's arms, king of angels and yet the reputed son of Joseph, heir of all things and yet the carpenter's despised son." This is the king whom the star is pointing to. Here he is. So why does God alert the universe of Jesus' arrival? Why does God put a star in the east so that wise men can come and worship him? Why does he disrupt what is happening in Jerusalem and start to shake Herod up and make religious leaders tremble? Why the disruption? Because Jesus is worthy of our worship. Because the king has arrived. The one that was prophesied, the one we just read the prophecy, the ruler, the one who will shepherd Israel. And when a king arrives, the king that we just described, he beckons a response. If Jesus is the one prophets foretold, the Son of God, born of a virgin, the one whom the stars aligned, the one that angels sang for, who is preeminent over all creation, orchestrating the cosmos, making peace in hearts, the King of Kings who makes earthly rulers worry, he is worthy of our worship. And if the Magi didn't come worship him, the very earth, the inanimate objects of the world would shout praises to him. But instead, we see these responses of people like Herod, who is troubled. He gathers the religious leaders, he summons the Magi, and he wants answers. He's so fearful. He's trying to scheme. He's like, oh, well, tell me where you find this king, because I want to come and worship him, and he didn't want to worship anything or anyone. Jesus coming threatened his rule, threatened his autonomy, leading him to the paranoid state of killing all of the young ones under age 2, all the young males under age 2, so that he could somehow feel like he will remain in the place he was. Jesus troubles the kings of the earth because his kingship is eternal and it's magnificent and it's beyond compare. And all the glory and splendor of Herod's legacy pales in comparison to the glory and splendor of King Jesus. And we see the religious leaders respond. And we read that they are troubled, but they're not just troubled, they're passive. And the religious leaders, friends, they're not a passive people. These are the people that gang up on Jesus and kill him in the end. Anybody that would go to take away their influence, they would strike down. They liked their place of prominence. We read all about that in Jesus' teachings. But instead, when the Messiah comes, and they were well aware of the scriptures that pointed to his coming, they remained passive. They knew the answers. They knew where the Messiah was born. But Jesus troubles them. He troubles the religious leaders of the day because they were passive. They weren't watchful, and they were unwilling to let God change their hearts and usurp their power. Then we have the Magi. We have these kind of wild men who are probably really godless and had no idea of who this Messiah was or even what that idea was all about. And they come and they are enticed by this king. They respond to the disruption more differently than anybody else. They follow this star miles and miles. And they find Jesus, and they give him gifts, and they fall to their knees. It's like the hymn, "Oh, come, let us adore him." They come, they behold him, they gaze at him, they're enamored by him, they worship. They worship Jesus. So my question here is okay, we have some folks who didn't worship Jesus, and we have some folks who did. What is worship then? Well, worship, just really simply, is we worship whatever we value above all other things. Worship is valuing something or someone above all other things. And what the wise men or the magi do when they come and they see Jesus is they fall to their knees and they probably put arms down and feel just prostrate before him. And that's a picture of what worship is. It's saying that I am low, I will get low, and you will be sitting above me. Here is my place below you, and this is your place above me. You deserve honor and glory and praise, and I will do whatever I need to lowly right here so that I could serve you, and I could defer to you, and I could praise you, and I could worship you, and you are in charge. And we see two groups of people, some who didn't worship and some who did. Like I would probably say that those same two groups of people are right in this room. Because we all get low for something or some things. We all worship. This sounds like an outdated term. Like when you think of these dudes coming from the east who are falling down and worshiping Jesus, you're just like, oh my goodness. If somebody flew in from Charlotte and came to Denver to worship something, they're nuts. But worship isn't as outdated as you may think. Everything in our lives pleads for our worship. Everything in our lives just pleads that we would get low so that it could kind of maintain this place of kingship in our own lives, in our hearts. That's what marketing's all about. They want to get a place in your life that you actually pay attention to it. Now, is everybody in marketing vicious and wants to ruin your life with some type of false god? No. But the best people in marketing know the hearts of those that they are trying to market to. Cell phones in our pockets plead with us to worship. Our work pleads with us to give more, to do more, to make a legacy for yourself, to pad your pockets, to do this, to do that. Even your own body pleads that you would worship it. You know, a good way of kind of taking a litmus test, and this isn't always 100%, but a good way of taking a litmus test of like, what is it that may be something that you tend to really let rule your life is if you're making a New Year's resolution, what are the first things that come to mind that you want to fix or be or become? And those things that they may be good. Like God knows I need to do 10 to 500 push-ups a day in my current state, right? So I'll probably not do any. But I'll say in the new year, oh, I need to, right? But there's this kind of thought in my mind here that like, oh man, like I live in Denver. People are well put together. I need to be well put together. People look at me and they probably think something here like this matters. I mean, like, yes, health isn't really important. But does that define who I am? No. Sometimes our New Year's resolution can kind of point us to what we tend to worship. And the reality is that we often bow to much less than what the Magi bowed to. We bow to much less with little return. Maybe like Herod, we bow to power, to control. We want power, we want control, and when we lose it, we begin to freak out. We become anxious. Or maybe like the religious leaders, we bow to comfort. Maybe we bow to autonomy. No one can tell me what to do. I control my own life. Maybe we bow to fun and thrills, and we always want to enjoy everything. If there's anything in life that does not lead to enjoyment, that we're not doing it right, maybe we bow to more money. Listen, all of these things aren't bad things in and of themselves. But what we have here is in this story, we have The Magi who are bowing to Jesus, and then we have a bunch of people who are not, and they're not bowing to Jesus because they're like, oh, well, he's definitely not the king. They're not like putting together some well-formulated argument. They're not bowing to Jesus because they're afraid. They're fearful. Like, have you found yourself skeptical of bowing to Jesus? It's not new. There's nothing like, oh man, like, look how new and provocative it is that this person is skeptical of bowing to Jesus. It's just not new. We see this when he was 1.5. But my question, if you find yourself in that camp and you're skeptical of bowing to Jesus, first off, like, I'm no better than you. This isn't some type of lashing. But I will say that I want to ask the question of, like, what are you threatened by something about Jesus, or do you really think this is all hokey? Does Jesus take something in your life and actually be like, oh, wait a minute, like, I don't want him to do in my life what I think he will do? Like, is that why you're skeptical? Or do you really think that that's all stupid and untrue and I'm not going to follow? Or are you fearful of the disruption of Jesus Christ in your life? How do you respond to Jesus? Does Jesus trouble you because of his inferior superiority as cosmic king? If he does, that makes sense. But I want you to know his disruption's really good. Or do you bow to him with joy because that king came to bring light and life and peace to your soul? I'll be honest here, I grew up thinking that, so when I talk about bowing, I'm talking about worshiping, right? And I grew up thinking that worshiping Jesus was all about just sucking any life from me, any fun, any enjoyment, all of it. The only way to worship Jesus right was to just, my life had to stink. It's almost like I had to live as a monk in the common world, right? And I had this idea that just wasn't true. Because here, when you see the Magi, these men from far out who come to worship Jesus, what marks them? Joy. The ones who are skeptical of Jesus are shaking in their boots, they're fearful, there's insecurities and they're not sure what to do, and the Magi come and they don't even know the truth about Jesus, but they realize that there's a king in front of them and they are marked by joy. Look at verse 10. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then gave him their treasures. What are they marked by? They are rejoicing exceedingly with great joy. It's like whoever wrote that or translated that, it's like they're rejoicing with joy and they have more joy. They're marked by this joy. And I used to think that worship sucked life out of me, but really Jesus gives life when we worship. Don't you see it in the text? You have these two different camps, and which one do you want to party with? I don't want to party with Herod. I'm going to die with Herod. But give me Dumbledore because he's bowing to Jesus. The main point here, friends, is that the great goal in all things, the reason I believe that this is found in Matthew 2, is that the great goal in all things is for Jesus to be known, for him to be adored, for him to be bowed to, and that we would have exceeding joy because of it. Let me ask you, is your view of worship like mine has been? Like, are you following Jesus and are you just joyless and you're just trying to kind of follow a protocol and kind of do what you think you need to do? Well, that's not the life God has for you. Even in the hardest of times, even with tears in our eyes, we can have joy when we bow to King Jesus. Because when we bow to King Jesus, we're actually living the way that we have been created to live. And if you're skeptical and you're even maybe frustrated that I'm bringing it up and you're like, why are you attacking me because of my skepticism? I'm not, but I want you to know that you are invited into this joy as well. When we bow to other things, it leaves us anxious and always scraping for more just because other things aren't king of the world. How's that for just a simple answer? Other things don't reign sovereignly over all. But Jesus does. And one of the sweetest things here is that although the Magi bring gifts, when we look at the gospel, when we come to Jesus, skeptic or not, worshiper or not, when we come to Jesus, guess what we need in our hands? Nothing. Nothing. I mentioned that Christmas hymn earlier, "O come all ye faithful." Well, it opens up with, "O come all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant." And I just sang that the other night and I was like, man, I don't feel faithful or really joyful or triumphant. I kind of know I am, but I certainly don't feel that way. I'm not engaged with this. But King Jesus came so that you didn't have to come joyfully, triumphantly, perfectly with gifts. He did all that. We can come to him messed up, faithless, heartbroken, waiting, prayerless, lost, losing. Some of you are trying to just muster up some Christmas joy because that's kind of how you're supposed to feel at Christmas. And guess what Jesus says? King Jesus says, come on in. The beauty and the chaos and the craziness of this story is that the Magi come and worship Jesus, and Herod and the religious leaders do everything they can to destroy him. And eventually the religious leaders end up killing Jesus, but Jesus conquers that too. But the thing is, at any point in this story, they could have turned to King Jesus, and Jesus would have had grace on them with empty hands and brutal, faithless hearts. One thing worth noting before we close out here is that this worship of Jesus, it extends to all people. The unique thing here is that the Magi show up to worship Jesus, and they're the ones that probably shouldn't have showed up at all. The Jews and all of Jerusalem are hostile towards this idea that a Messiah has come. The religious leaders sit passively, Herod's aggressively angry and wants to kill him. But the Magi, who are outside of the Jewish community, outside of the people of God, are actually the ones that come to worship him, which points to the fact that Jesus came to extend salvation beyond the Jews to the whole world. Jesus is not only to be worshiped by the Jews, but by the nations, as prophesied in Isaiah, that the nations shall come to light. So Jesus comes and he has joy for all. This is why as believers, hey, we don't just come and adore Jesus, but we go and tell about Jesus too. We tell the world that there's joy for you. If you're skeptical, if you're nervous, if you feel like life is against you, there is someone who came for you and is for you. So we see in this story that God sovereignly, he disrupts the lives of many people because Jesus is worthy of worship. And those who worship him will be from every nation. They'll look every which way. They'll speak different languages. They'll have different stories. But one thing is true, they will be marked by joy. Like I said earlier, the biggest takeaway of this entire text is that the great goal in all things is for Jesus to be known, to be adored, to be bowed down to, and that we would, with all nations, have exceeding joy because of it. But the truth is, just like the Magi, just like Herod, just like Israel, we're forced to respond. We're forced to respond here. And my question is, how do you respond to the disruption of Jesus? Do you respond with worship? And if you do, like, what's your worship look like? Does it look like me, where I kind of just worship Jesus and I was kind of afraid of actually enjoying him and realizing that enjoying Jesus equals his glory in my life? How do you respond to the disruption of Jesus? Do you have disdain for him? Are you fearful of what he might do in your life? He's going to take away what you've always wanted, what you've been building. He's going to try to mess with your pockets. He's going to, tell you that you have to stop having that affair. He's going to tell you that you have to stop being such an angry father to your kids. He's going to tell you that, he might tell you those things, but the disruption's going to lead you to joy. It's going to lead you to fullness. He has all of life for you. Any gospel that you heard that was just taking things away from you and not giving you everything you've ever longed for is just not the truth of what we just read. So we could come with joy. We could come adore him. We could behold him because he's a really good king. And his disruption is a really good grace in our own lives.